Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into something that goes way, way deeper than just asking that classic question, should we still keep the Sabbath? We're actually going to track the theological evolution of the Sabbath, exploring what it meant to the ancient world versus how it was completely reimagined by the early church.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to start at square one. What did Sabbath actually mean in the Bible's original setting? To unpack this, we're going to look impartially at two major scholarly perspectives. First, Dr. Lydia Klein argues that right out of the gate in Genesis, the Sabbath began as God's enthronement in his cosmic temple. But on the flip side, Dr. Thomas Barrett contends that while that ancient cosmic temple reading is totally accurate, the New Testament comes along and redefines the Sabbath entirely around a life in Christ. So let's explore how these two views intersect.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how the ancient concept literally shatters our modern preconceptions of what it means to rest. Think about it. The modern Western definition of Sabbath usually just boils down to taking a day off from work. It's pure inactivity, right? But the ancient Near Eastern definition, it's fundamentally different. To the ancient mind, divine rest actually meant God taking his throne to rule.
And just to be clear, we are grounding this explainer firmly in academic research, drawing directly on peer-reviewed scholarship from institutions like Liberty University. We'll be looking at the incredible work of experts like Dr. Michael S. Heiser, Dr. John Walton, and Dr. N.T. Wright, who have spent their careers unpacking this ancient context of God's rest. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll move through four key areas. First, the ancient context. Second, sacred space and time. Third, the New Testament shift. And finally, Jesus as the ultimate rest. Let's jump right into part one, the ancient context and God's cosmic temple.
Dr. Lydia Klein, alongside scholars like John Walton, points out that we honestly tend to misread the creation account. As this concept beautifully highlights, the cosmos is God's temple. The earth is his footstool. In ancient thought, Genesis 1 and 2 aren't just giving us a scientific account of material origins. They're actually depicting a massive cosmic temple-building project. God is constructing a space for himself to dwell.
So the absolutely crucial point here centers on the ancient concept of rest, or menuha in Hebrew. It definitely didn't mean taking a nap because God was tired. It meant a moment of exaltation and regal repose. Picture an environment where God is finally seated on the throne in his newly built temple, totally free of anxiety, taking up his residence to rule over order. Which brings us perfectly to part two, sacred space and time and the tabernacle connection. You've got to see this. Notice how the creation of the cosmic temple in Genesis 1 and 2 is mirrored exactly by the earthly tabernacle in Exodus 25 through 31. It's like a mathematical blueprint. We see 7 acts of divine speech in Genesis mirrored perfectly by 7 speeches giving tabernacle instructions. Genesis says the heavens and earth are finished. Exodus says all the work on the tabernacle is finished. And finally, God rests on the 7th day in Genesis, which directly culminates in the Sabbath command for the tabernacle in Exodus. It is the exact same theological concept. As scholar Moshe Weinfield's research points out, God's sanctuary is explicitly considered his rest. The priesthood in Israel wasn't just blindly observing a day on the calendar. They were essentially using the Sabbath to physically actualize the completion of creation. In the ancient world, creation and temple building were always intimately tied to the enthronement of the deity. And building on this, N.T. Wright notes a really fascinating detail. If Eden is where heaven meets earth, the ultimate cosmic temple, then what about the idol? Because in the ancient world, the very last thing placed in a newly built temple was the image of the god. But Israel didn't have carved idols, right? Why? Because humanity is the living image placed inside the temple. God put living, breathing humans in Eden as his image bearers to rule right alongside him. Okay, let's look at part 3, the New Testament shift and a redefined perspective. This is exactly where Dr. Thomas Barrett's perspective comes into focus. New Testament experts point to a major progression in the book of Hebrews chapter 4, verse 9. It says, "So then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God." Here, the rest becomes an eschatological reality. It is no longer just a day of the week you check off a list. It's tied directly to salvation by grace through faith. Entering God's rest literally means entering into his salvation. Because of this massive theological shift, the Apostle Paul treats the Sabbath very differently than a strict legal requirement. In his letters to the Romans, Colossians, and Galatians, the Sabbath is relegated to what's called adiaphora, which basically means matters of indifference or disputable conscience. It became a circumcision-neutral issue for the diverse, newly formed church. It was absolutely no longer a merit-based law that defined your standing with God.
Which leads us to our final section, part 4, Jesus as the ultimate rest, the synthesis. This conceptual progression is honestly mind-blowing when you step back and look at it. The sacred space where God dwells evolved over time. From the cosmos, specifically Eden, it localized down to the tabernacle and the temple. Then, the dwelling place of God became Jesus' actual physical body. And finally, it becomes the believers themselves, the church. Think about what that means. If believers are the new temple where God's Spirit actually dwells, then Christ himself is our ultimate Sabbath rest. There are not two separate paths of salvation. You don't need Jesus plus a specific calendar day to earn God's favor. Jesus himself is the completion. He is the Sabbath. Therefore, entering God's new rest means something incredibly profound for us today. It's not about just sitting around in inactivity. It's about completion. It's resting in salvation by grace through faith. It means rejoining the divine family. And it means working alongside God as his image bearers to maintain a restored global Eden. It's this beautiful already but not yet reality where we actively get to participate in God's kingdom right now. So, if the Sabbath is not some strict calendar obligation, but rather a state of being in God's presence, I want to leave you with this to ponder. How does knowing this ancient, cosmic perspective change your modern view of what it means to truly rest?